This is a great moment for me that I can talk to my dear colleague and friend, Olga Levaniouk, who in the late 90s taught with me a course on Euripides for undergraduates and graduates. And I still remember, Olga, when we were focusing on what we'll now call our 20 text I, which is from Hippolytus, 1423 to 1430, and I'll just quickly run through it again. To you, poor sufferer, says the goddess, in compensation for these bad things that have happened to you here, the greatest honors in the city of Trozen I will give to you. Unwed girls, before they get married, will cut off their hair for you, and throughout the length of time you will harvest the very great sorrows, pentos, of their tears. And for all time there will be a thought that comes along with the song-making, directed at you by virgin girls, and it will be a troubled thought. The story and the names will not fall aside unremembered. The story of the passionate love, eros, of Phaedra for you. No, it will never be passed over in silence. And I remember how you, when we were reading this particular passage with our students, very incisively compared the folk traditions of the Russian people, especially as collected by Vladimir Prop. And then you did that beautiful article in an anniversary volume about wedding practices, singing of laments, singing of love songs. And I would be so happy if you could maybe reminisce a little bit about just the way you started discovering these wonderful points of comparison, your discovery procedure, as it were.
Well, that was a discovery procedure. It all started in that class, in Hippolytus class, and there was this passage, and it reminded me of hair customs of Russian brides. And I know that there are other parallels. You know, in Greece you cut off hair for the dead, but I saw a parallel there in the sense that in Russian wedding customs and Russian songs, there is a way of talking about hair as a sort of beauty and glory of the maiden, of the young woman. And I later, much later, not in late 90s but in 2012, came to the conclusion that there was a similar way of talking about maidenly hair in Greece, where it is almost seen as insolent and arrogant in its luxuriance. And there are similar sort of expressions about its luxuriance, and almost to the point of sort of being challenging or insolent. And then when a woman gets married, the hairstyle changes, and she parts with her maidenly hairdo, and she laments about it. And after that, her hair is bound up tightly, so there is a very visual imagery. There is this free, luxuriant hair when she's young, and then it is all braided and wound around her head and covered with a headdress when she marries, and so she loses that. And the way that girls seem to dedicate their maidenly, specifically maidenly hair to Hippolytus, sort of remind me of all that, of what the maidenly hair might stand for. So that was the beginning of it. And there was another ode. It was a sort of strange, interplay between the very first choral ode in Hippolytus and this last end of the play, where Artemis is saying these words that you just read to the hero. Because in the beginning, the very first choral ode, where we don't know yet, well, or we know, but the chorus is wondering what is wrong with Phaedra, they talk about women washing clothes in these beautiful springs, the waters of which come from Okeanos, the river that encircles the world, and they are talking amongst themselves, saying what happened to Phaedra. And that also reminded me very much of Russian wedding songs, where girls go together and they spend time by water, by the river, and there is always one of them, and something might be wrong with her, and she is a concern, and everybody is talking about the one, and she's of course the best one, the main one, the one who will be the bride. And so that way that they wash their clothes and wonder what has happened, what is happening to Phaedra, also very much reminded me of even the structure of how the conversation proceeds in these wedding songs.
And you know, for us moderns, when we think of love songs, all we can think about is a Rodgers and Hammerstein kind of scenario where boy looks at girl, girl looks at boy on the screen, and they sing to each other about how much they love each other, and they're very happy. Yeah. This is so different. And there's still a lot of happiness, especially when you think back about these beautiful moments. But I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more. You had such a good start in talking about the one in the group who seems to be sadder than the others, and the one who's singled out. But it's still a group experience, something that is very much a sharing of emotions. So if you could go into a little bit more detail about how this dynamic, which we see in the chorus, but it's hard for us to imagine in an ancient Greek chorus, how this can be brought to life by observing what actually happens in Russian customs.
Yes, so that's another thing that when I went back to, when I, after putting this sort of on a back burner for, a decade, when I went back to looking at comparing what we have from ancient Greece with what we have from Russian weddings, that was very striking. The similarities are actually, no, there are of course differences, and you can't make facile parallels, but similarities were striking. There is a very similar dynamic. The girls, there isn't this kind of, even though there is actually sometimes a moment that is described as falling in love, it's usually in songs of the groom, I should say, where the groom's party also sings songs, and in their songs they sometimes say that he rode by on his horse and she saw him and she was smitten. But in the girl songs, the songs that are sung by this group, it's very different, and there is a very clear sense that girls come in groups. Girls don't come singly. And they actually, in those Russian villages that I looked at, they have very, they have a great degree of freedom in their maidenhood. And they can meet a young man, and there are even, just as I think it was the case in ancient Greece, and here I'm thinking of the shield of Achilles and this beautiful dancer and the dancing floor of Ariadne. They have things like that. They have specific times of year where there are specific places where they go, and they have choral dances, and boys dance with girls in groups, and they have games, and they have swings, and they have all of that is happening, but there is always a chorus of girls and a chorus of boys. And then when it comes to wedding, when it comes to love songs, there is this notion that yes, there is a group, and yet there is one that is still part of a group, and yet already not quite. That she is distinct. So when somebody is betrothed, when the first step is taken, that will eventually, in the course of a week, lead to her marriage, she is ritually separated from the group. And it doesn't mean that they will not see each other any longer. The group actually will spend the whole week with her. They will always sing together and dance together. But now they become like in the Odyssey, like Nausicaa and her companions. They are all together, and one of them is distinct in two ways. She is described, depending on the song, both as taller, more beautiful, brighter. She is the moon and they are the stars. Every branch is beautiful on this tree, but the top branch is the most beautiful. This is how they talk about this chosen one. And also she is saddest and sometimes the worst looking of all. Everybody is laughing and she is not. Everybody is playing and she sits aside. Everybody's hair is combed and decorated with flowers and only hers is unadorned. So there is a sense that she is suddenly she is overcome by cares. Suddenly they are still carefree and suddenly she has troubles. The troubled thoughts that you were talking about, that very much reminds me of both things in ancient Greek tragedy elsewhere. For example, when Deianira talks about how when you get married in one night you take your share of cares, and this Russian songs in which they say 1 hour, 1 minute, this one interaction between the families of the bride and the groom means that suddenly she is not joyful any longer. Suddenly she has all these troubles and cares on her mind. Suddenly she is looking down. Suddenly she is not laughing. So yes, that is very true. And that sort of notion that girls come in a group and that one of them is a soloist, it's very much present there. But there is also, there is a in Russian evidence, what becomes so clear is that it is a sort of ritually determined role, that another girl will be a soloist in her turn, that every one of them, when it is her time to be married, will become the prima donna of this performance.